Hello and welcome to 2023 DLFF Film Festival. We are online as a hybrid festival this year, uh, just to give everyone an opportunity to participate if they're unable to come to the actual festival this year. We are live this year, just May 12th and 13th. We have a new venue. We're at you know, going with the flow. We're changing, but always in a good way. And we're so delighted to welcome six talented screenwriters. All of their screenplays have been selected as official selections for 2023. They are unlikely or unavailable to appear in person, which is a shame, but that's why we're having this opportunity. Okay, I'm gonna have you go around, introduce yourself, introduce your screenplay, and maybe give the log line or a brief synopsis of your story. Make sure you tell us your genre. I think everyone except Sterling has a full length feature, and they're all either comedy or comedy horror, comedy slash horror, not pure horror. But that's the great thing about this festival. So Sterling, let's start with you,
Sure.
and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sterling. Ray covered that. No, my name is Stirling McLaughlin. I am a screenwriter from Evanston, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. I don't know if you can see my background. Last year, Best Pilot winner at Die Laughing Film Festival. Very proud of that. Prominently displayed in my kitchen. And This year, I am back along with my co-writer, Wilder Konchak, with a short screenplay, very short, about 10 pages, called Finding Bigfoot at Home, which is almost exactly what it sounds like. It's about a Bigfoot hunter trying to find Bigfoot from home during COVID lockdown. So that's
Just the perils of COVID hit every aspect of everyone's life.
especially Bigfoot hunters got it the worst.
Yeah.
So,
Sterling, I'm glad the award is in your kitchen and not in your bathroom. I appreciate that.
well, I've got other rewards, lesser
Yeah.
rewards, the bathroom.
Okay, Joe, you want to introduce yourself in your screenplay?
I'm Joe. My pen name is J. Aldric Gaudet. The screenplay is Incident on Highway 7. It's set in 1974, so I was taking a skewed look at our past. The whole thing plays out in about 13 hours as a chase, and through it all, we hear radio announcements that make ironic comments on the times. That's a running through concept like in American Graffiti. It's a comedy thriller about three dramatically different couples um, whose relationships are put to the test. Yeah, this is my pitching is not my thing. It's a comedy whose relationships are put to the test when they stop at a crash site and overhear the dying driver reveal the winner of tomorrow's mob fixed horse races. One of the couples are second time singles returning from blind date, an older couple from New Brunswick. Anyway, yeah, you don't want to get into the whole thing. I just like writing about ordinary people, and I have fun with playing around with the cliche movie plots. So this one I threw in a ludicrous MacGuffin and let it all flow. And there's a whole bunch of character cameos. That's the story, or that I mean that's the screenplay, but that's hard to sell like that.
Well, everything's hard to sell, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Michael, would you introduce yourself in your screenplay, please?
Oh, sure. Well, my name is Michael Charboneau, and I am a screenwriter excuse my hearing aid, screenwriter and filmmaker. And this particular screenplay that I submitted is called King of T Street, and it is about a man called Aldric.
Oh, you're breaking up.
Screenplay about my father and a very troubled life that he had. And it deals basically throughout his life and how he meets the love of his wife, Eleanor Charboneau, and by them working together, they're able to go from rags to riches story and build a small empire in the most unlikely and least likely situations, and always seem to have an uncanny ability to find business opportunities in the most unlikely situations. And it's genre-wise, well, it's a romantic comedy drama. So road dramedy, I guess is the right word for it. And it's, it's based off of life experiences and the examples that he set, where he basically said an honest man may take him longer to get what he needs, but in the end, he gets to keep it.
Great, thank you. Laura, welcome, Laura. Will you introduce yourself and your screenplay?
Hi, I'm Laura DeBar. I'm in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a filmmaker and screenwriter. And Sterling, I just acted in a feature film about Bigfoot here in North Carolina. To message you the link to it.
You didn't play Bigfoot, did you?
No, I played a newscaster warning the
Okay.
public about
Good.
Bigfoot sightings.
Because
Did it
once you
all
play
take place
Bigfoot,
inside
you
of an
just get.
apartment? Because if it took place inside of an apartment, I've got problems.
No,
Laura,
it's out in the wilderness.
yeah, Laura, once you play Bigfoot once, you're typecast. So good
Yeah.
career choice. Okay, tell us about Book Club Massacre, please.
Yeah, so Book Club Massacre is about a lonely librarian searching for love in a new town. So she forms a book club, but the members are being murdered by an unknown assailant. So it's a comedy slasher horror. I like to call it an elevated slasher. It was inspired by classic slashers from the 70s and 80s, like Schizoid and Communion, if anyone remembers that one. And I try to have more relevant comparisons, like maybe a little bit like Scream, and also Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. It's kind of about intellectuals losing their minds. It's kind of socially conscious, deals with, the killer turns out to have some issues, so it deals with racism, classism, sexism, but it's a comedy. It's a dark comedy.
Ultimately. Erin, hi, welcome. So happy to have you. Could you describe your screenplay, please?
Sure, yeah. So mine is a straight comedy. I guess could be a rom-com. So my logline is after developing two alternate personalities who are in a relationship with each other, John has finally managed to establish a routine and hold down a steady job until the alternate personalities break up, and then his whole life becomes chaotic, and that's the story.
Well, thank you, Erin. And finally, last but not least, Jim, tell us about Hazel the Viking.
It would be my pleasure. Jim Norman. I live in Plantation, Florida, which is a suburb of Fort Lauderdale. We like to describe it as God's country and other terms for Fort Lauderdale. I have written now 36 screenplays. The one that is a selection in this festival is called Hazel the Viking. And it is about the life of a girl through adulthood who has inherited Viking genes. And as a result of some actions taken by Eric the Red on his deathbed, she, when stressed or threatened, becomes a Viking, fully equipped and fully able to do things. And what this ability does is really cause her problems in leading a normal life. But there are elements in this, I would call it comedy, fantasy, and maybe a little bit of a life story, since it is modeled after the director of a screenplay I wrote and his 5-year-old daughter, who did in fact inherit Viking genes from her mother's side of the family, and who is, as her father would say, a very tough customer.
Yeah. Great. So I have a specific question for Erin, and then after she answers it, I'll ask the general question to the group. The general question doesn't apply as closely to Erin's screenplay, so that's why I'm asking her a different question. And then for the rest of you, you could either answer Erin's special question, or you can answer the equally special general question, okay? But
I don't know if special is good or bad in this situation.
Special is good, okay? Erin, I want you to talk about voice, because every screenwriter I think a challenge is distinct voices, right, for the different characters. But you have an extra layer because you
Yeah.
have the protagonist, and then he's got voices, separately and distinct from. So why don't you answer that question?
Yeah. So when I was writing it, I was trying to figure out how it would look, obviously as a film. So I thought that it would be, unless I was going to be like cartoonish with it, I just needed one actor, like amazingly talented actor to play all of the personalities, as opposed to like, they actually have their own persona and they're talking to each other and stuff. So I basically gave each character like a distinct accent and mannerisms and like physicality, so that hopefully, in theory, if this gets filmed, it would be clear who he is when he's speaking, because they're all speaking through his body, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the way that I went about it. I think that when you're reading it, it's easy because it's like obviously all the different characters, you're reading their names, that's who's talking. I think filming it will be more challenging because it's going to really be on the actor to like change and change and change and change and change. But the personalities were easy to make different from each other, because of course when you have multiple personalities, you want them all to be like very opposite and different, and nobody's going to be confused for someone else, in theory.
I think that was an extra challenge for the screenwriter, and then, as you said, for the director or the actor, and the actor as well, because you definitely had a very clear vision of what you wanted to convey on the page. But obviously, when it takes that leap to production, there's always a little bit maybe differing of opinion, not necessarily good or bad, but differing.
Oh,
Okay,
for
so
sure, yeah. If anyone wants to make it, you can do whatever you want. It can be a cartoon. It can be in like India. I don't care. Let's do it. I'll
just buy
rewrite
it. Yeah, just buy it.
Just make the movie.
I think we all feel that same way. Okay, so the other five of you, I have a question because I was kind of looking for themes, and you can answer Erin's question about voice, but your question is to discuss time and setting, because all five of your screenplays rely very heavily on time, specific time and setting. And I just want to know, what was your thought process, and how you brought that up. I mean, Jim's screenplay travels in time and in place, but that was necessary to show the life of the protagonist. But let's just go around again. Sterling, why don't you comment on time and setting for yours, which seems a little bit obvious as well because it's set in COVID, but maybe that or voice. Although your screenplay is actually mostly a monologue,
Yeah.
with another secondary character, but so whichever question you prefer.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, the inspiration really was just a really dumb sketch comedy thing, right? Find a job and then find the person who's least equipped to do that job, right? So job is Bigfoot hunter. Who's the worst person to be a Bigfoot hunter? Someone stuck at home during COVID. So so that's really, I mean, that was the entire inspiration that kind of went from there. Secondarily, it was something conceived during COVID lockdown, where I was thinking, hadn't been able to shoot or produce anything. And I was looking for something that had literally the smallest budget possible, that A, wouldn't require me to leave the house, and B, would be very easily filmed. I mean, it's literally like cell phone camera by design. And then I never got around to writing it. And then COVID ended. And then and then I finally wrote the script. But yeah, so it was just kind of, as I was writing it, originally I had this very like sketch comedy concept. As I was writing it, it became sort of this very dark piece about just having a hobby that that success is almost impossible, and it's all consuming, and it just felt a lot like I was writing about being a screenwriter in his 40s. So it kind of was a dark night of the soul. But then I get to, kill the character off at the end. So that
Hey,
that
no
was,
spoilers.
no spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, actually, that's not a spoiler. You know that from the very beginning.
right, yeah. Spoiler alert, he finds Bigfoot at home.
Hiding in a closet.
He just comes out of the bathroom.
As Bigfoot would.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah. Well, it felt thematically like, well, we got to do something. He can't just like not find Bigfoot. That's just a bummer. So he finds Bigfoot and he kills him. I spoiled the whole thing. Nobody's going to watch this now. That's
No, they will. They will. Okay, Joe, you want to tell us about incident on Highway 7 and probably, I'm more curious about time and setting, but obviously you can discuss voice as well because you have multiple characters with different voices. So
that was it. I was playing with a whole bunch of characters, and each one had to have their own voice, their own concept, their own idea. But at the same time, I'm playing with time. I was making jokes through time by our ability to look back on what was ironic at the time. I was playing around with that in terms of what the characters were doing, how they were behaving, and what they had to do. The first ATMs and having to memorize your code number and having to remember it when you're gotten back to the ATM and trying to frantically get at your money. And I played a lot with the, I think I mentioned it before, but the radio announcements that are going on, they make ironic comments like ads for Pintos, fastest selling car, best selling car. Or one of my favorites was an announcement that Steven Spielberg was going to be starting to film in Martha's Vineyard. He was going to be there for 2 weeks. If anyone knows the story, they know that he was there for over a year. Anyway, the idea of time and the idea of voice is all part and parcel of the setting that is the story, and you really have to get inside that in order to make it all to have texture, feel real.
Yeah. Well, great job. It was, you're balancing a lot of things, and you did that very adroitly. Michael, can you tell us whichever question kind of piqued your interest? Because I think they're both applicable. But tell us a little bit about your thoughts.
Well, for King of G Street, obviously it's a life story of an individual. So for time wise, you're going through many years, decades of things. When I try to find out, and what I do with my writing is, for the reader and hopefully the film goer, is give them some way to connect with this person and their story by putting either historical moments, cultural elements, things like that happened during those time periods. So they, oh yeah, okay, I know where I was at this time. This happened. A great example is some where in the mid 70s the Teton Dam busted in Idaho, and so I'm if somebody was familiar with that, they'd say, oh yeah, I was there. Voice wise, I've always tried to make sure all my characters have their own voice. A previous movie I did, which is about an 80s rock and roll band, obviously the things that I did with that where every character had a unique way they spoke and unique phrases and that. So when you heard that or read that, it instantly said, okay, that's this character. I obviously tried to keep that going with King of G Street so that each of the characters involved had a different way of speaking, some either, higher intellect or some lower, as far as their vocabulary. And tried to keep it along that lines. But the biggest thing is trying to allow the reader to connect and feel like they're a part of that story because they have those same ideas or those same experiences.
Great, thank you. Laura, so setting is so important to your screenplay. How did you pick the environment and the occupation? It doesn't seem like a logical choice, but I'm just curious how you came about that.
Really? A librarian starting a book club?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not familiar with the breadth of screenplays that focus on a librarian, I guess library.
Well, I was a librarian for many years. Not officially. I worked in the library. I was technically a library tech. I didn't
great.
get in library science, but I worked in libraries for years. and especially at colleges, and I was a college counselor, and so it was kind of inspired by a lot of the library drama, especially at colleges, the issues of like sexism and racism and PC wars, kind of like what we call today woke wars, and kind of making fun of that. And there's a lot of college kids in the book club, but I don't, at the time and place, like I definitely like tone and voice. I tried to have everybody in the book club have their own voice, but I wrote it like right after I got vaccinated for the first time, and then I was in a slasher in Charlotte. What was it? I can't remember what it was called, but it was like based on a 70s classic slasher, and so it inspired me like, oh, I should try to write a slasher. I'd never done that before. I'd written other screenplays, but not like a horror slasher thing. So
great, amazing. And finally, Jim, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I think I will talk about time, because as you're talking about voice in terms of the writer's voice, I think perhaps I am obsessed by time. And since in Hazel the Viking, it's really about one person's life journey. The normal thing would be start with the child, go through life, become the adult, maybe even go into old age. But I didn't want to do that, because I had an element in there where they're talking about family history, and I get to show that becomes a Western, that the time shift from present day back, but is a necessary part of the why are the characters the way they are, what happened. And I needed the Eric the Red death scene, which I have to say was probably inspired by Mel Brooks somewhere along the line. And that's really, I tend often to have time elements in my screenplays.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being so articulate and just kind of spreading your talent. I really appreciate your support. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much. Hopefully see you next year, and stay safe.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Ray, thank you.